Welcome to Unpacked. This is the Aorus X7 Pro. Now, we showed you guys the X3, which is their 13-inch class gaming laptop. That one featured NVIDIA's GTX 970M, which is pretty darn impressive. Well, with the extra space in this laptop, Gigabyte has packed not one, but two GPUs, and some pretty powerful ones too. They are not messing around, and they are here to claim the crown for thinnest, lightest, fastest SLI gaming laptop, or maybe not the most of any of those categories, but possibly the best balance of all of those things with the X7 Pro. The styling is distinctly Aorus. They've stuck to their usual, actually quite beautiful design here. And the system itself is actually a derivative of the regular Aorus X7, of which there were two versions. So despite that Pro badge, not a whole lot has changed aesthetically. The full aluminum chassis is extremely rigid and has a matte black finish that's relatively fingerprint resistant compared to at least brushed aluminum. The Thermal Plus technology that keeps this thing cool is also still present here. So in order to keep both the CPU and two GPUs cool, there are actually 6 heat pipes inside, 4 vents and 2 fans that exhaust air out the back and the sides. So the thermal parts are arranged to keep as much heat away from your hands and wrists as possible. So most of the heat generating components are up here closer to the top of the keyboard, but of course inside. Now the first thing that you're going to notice when you look at the laptop is the thickness or thinness or whatever word you want to use for it. At 22.9 millimeters thick, it's extremely nice to hold and doesn't feel bulky despite its overall size, and the weight is pretty impressive too at only 3 kilograms. On the left-hand side, you've got a speaker vent, a microphone, headphone jack, a USB 3 port, VGA out, a surround port, okay, and a little bit more about that later, Gigabit Ethernet, and then finally an exhaust vent. At the back, you find 2 more exhaust vents and 2 USB 2.0 ports, as well as power in. On the right-hand side, you're going to find another exhaust port. You're going to find mini display port, HDMI, 2 USB 3.0 ports, a card reader, and then another speaker port. And finally, at the front, you're just going to find indicator LEDs for the onboard functionality. Actually, I guess I should probably also talk about the bottom, where there are 2 woofer ports, so you actually get reasonably good sound out of this laptop, especially considering its thinness, as well as rubber feet and lots of intake vents. Now, one thing to point out before we move on, it's nice that there are so many display outputs because this system supports NVIDIA Surround, so hence the surround port. You can actually connect up to 3 external displays and have the built-in screen running all at the same time. With the system open, you find the 2 2-watt speakers above the keyboard. The keyboard itself is a chiclet style and has built-in anti-ghosting, which of course just means that you've got reasonable key rollover. I've done a video not that long ago about how ghosting and rollover are not actually the same thing, but when manufacturers say anti-ghosting, they're generally talking about rollover, so you're not going to have any issues with the with buttons not being registered when you press too many of them at the same time, especially in the key gaming areas. These macro buttons here along the left-hand side allow you to switch profiles and will actually change color depending on which profile you are using. All of these can be set using the Aorus Macro Hub software. And speaking of software, Aorus has a full suite of software for customizing all sorts of cool things such as fan curves and even lighting effects. The trackpad is glass, just like the X3, and as far as glass trackpads go, I really wish they'd do something a little bit more similar to HP's EliteBooks with a frosted glass, but it's definitely better than plastic in my mind, because at least it won't wear down. So you're going to have to decide, do you want something that wears out, or do you want something that's a bit of a smudge magnet? Your call. For the screen, we've got a 17.3-inch 19 by 20 by 1080 LCD with actually quite excellent viewing angles. For a 17-inch screen alone, that's a decent resolution. However, it's odd that they decided to put a 1440p screen or even up to a 3K screen in the X3 and only a 1080p screen here. Just a little bit of an odd choice. Personally, I don't mind it because especially for a mobile GPU, even if you've got two of them, you want to be able to turn up your details. You can use dynamic super resolution to get a little bit more image quality out of it, but you're not going to be running things at 4K or even 3K very often as new games roll out, so I don't mind the slightly lower resolution on a notebook. Above the screen, you've got a 1 megapixel webcam, so the least exceptional thing ever, and then onto the stuff that is quite exceptional. On the inside, we find a 4870HQ clocked at 2.5 gigahertz that turbos up to 3.7 gigahertz. That's paired with 4 or 8 gigs of DDR3L, although there are 4 slots internally available for up to 32 gigs of DDR3 low voltage memory. For wireless connectivity, you've got 802.11 AC and Bluetooth 4.0, and then there are the two extreme components of the system here. So number one is their quadruple storage system. There's a single standard SATA slot for a regular 2.5-inch hard drive, and there are also 3 M-SATA slots, each supporting up to 512 gig M-SATA SSDs. They can actually be rated together then for super quick storage. The one that we've got here has 2 256 gig M-SATA drives in RAID 0 out of the box. Extreme component number 2 is the SLI GPUs. This system has 2 GTX 970Ms with a total of 5 gigs of GDDR5. However, it should be noted that, of course, frame buffer doesn't stack in SLI, so you only get the effective video memory of 1 GPU. Now, Gigabyte claims that this configuration can get up to 40% more performance than a GTX 980M, scoring over 14,000 points in 3D Mark 11, and in my experience, it is significantly faster than a 980M, as long as SLI is working. So you're just going to have to, as with any SLI configuration, look into the games that you're going to be running and find out if you're going to benefit from them. Overall, I guess that's pretty much it. It's truly amazing the amount of hardware they've managed to cram into this chassis while keeping it fairly light as well. Thank you guys for watching. I'd love for you to comment. Let us know, how would you use SLI graphics on the go? Like the video if you liked it, and as always, don't forget to subscribe.